New Buddha-ware Dhamma Talks. Geoff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
We'd like to talk today about what sorts of things get in the way of our practices. Practice is something new for us, and sometimes it takes quite a while to understand what it is that we're doing and why are we doing it. But once we do catch on what it is, we then find it's quite difficult to sustain it. So as usual in the Buddhist way of doing things, the best thing is to be aware of those difficulties so that they become part of one's teaching and not part of one's enemy. So the Buddha has a whole sutta on this called the Nivarana Sutta. Nivarana means blockages, difficulties, hindrances. So what we'll talk about today is what gets in the way, or what we think of as getting in the way of our daily practice, our ordinary practice. Because when I'm with people, very often I hear people saying that they can't practice meditation because of this or because of that or whatever, not realizing that all that this and that actually are part of the training or instruction, and that one can learn from those. So it's a bit of a paradox that one can learn from good teachers who set an example, but actually one can learn a lot from bad teachers once one realizes how they are misleading you. So much of the Buddha's teaching is about awareness and self-awareness. So when we talk about hindrances, which is the usual translation, we are talking about difficulties, obstacles, delaying, resistance to actually doing the practice, or not even knowing what we mean by practicing. So I think we all know enough now to know that the key to it is being aware of one's construction of the self. That is, that one is aware of the motions of one's own mind, whether they're thoughts, memories, feelings, reactions. It is as though one has constructed a little lighthouse or something which can throw light onto one's own feelings. So that lighthouse is very helpful. It tells us where the obstacles are, it tells us what the obstacles are like, just like a lighthouse warns the ships. If you go that way, you're going to end up broken on the rocks. And I think in some ways the teaching on hindrances is similar, saying, you throw light yourself on yourself. This isn't always a pleasant exercise because you may not like yourself very much. And the other mistake to make is that I should really be perfect, but I've got all these things getting in the way. That's a mistake as well. What you have to understand is that you're learning from being aware of the way the self is constructed and maintained day by day. And a lot of unhappiness, a lot of fear, anxiety, and so on are actually lie there. So it's really important to at least have some indication of where the hindrances are. So the Buddha, or more likely the Buddha's teachers, put together some doctrines, and there's something called the 5 hindrances, which is a way of dividing up the common ways in which we say, I'm finding this difficult. Right? So just to reiterate, we're talking about difficulties, obstacles, delays, resistance, blockages of various sort, to what we think we should be doing when we're practicing. So part of the problem here is that we got a wrong idea of what it is to practice. You can practice any time, and the New Buddha way, not being monks who have decided to step into emptiness, as it were, by giving away their attention to their families, giving away money, by giving away everything, and living off dependence on others. Now, we are not in that category. So we have to make use of the daily things that happen to us, and the daily things that we do, and what's going on through this mind of ours. What a relief it is when one learns to let go of what is rushing through the mind all the time. So what are the five things? Well, if we were a hoarder, hoarding up things so you can't get through the door, and that's what it's like actually with difficulties in practice, we find that we can't get through the doors because this pile of junk that's in the mind. And let's see if we can put them into some categories. So, which is quite useful, this little piece of doctrine. It's desire, ill will, laziness, worry, and doubt. Now, don't take these words too seriously. We're constantly warned by Buddhist teachers not to take words too dogmatically or too narrowly. They're just indicators. So, but by desire, we don't mean sexual desire or desire for food or whatever in particular. It's just desire for anything, which is wanting or craving for something. And you might think, well, I don't actually do that very much. But it's as you learn to watch yourself, you realize that you do actually spend quite a lot of time wanting something and not getting it. And wanting something, that's the key thing. Wanting it, not getting it. And then what next? One feels frustration, impatience, a whole range of things start popping up. And then if there's a little Buddhist spell in there, it says, oh, I'm having all these thoughts and feelings. I'm not really very happy when I'm doing that. What can I do about it? How can I, in the famous phrase, let it go or let them go? Okay, so that's what we're finding out. By the way, this is a very important, but it is not it's not the most important of the Buddhist teachings. This teaching is around clearing out the rubbish, really, before we start laying out our garden. There are a lot more teachings which are never mentioned in the psychotherapy kind of approach to the teachings. This is one part. Mindfulness is one part of the Buddhist teaching, and it's really a focus on cleaning out the rubbish. The Buddha is much more positive than that. He also tells us which way to go, which comes a little bit later. We've got to clear out the rubbish first. You can't build a garden if you've got a garden full of rubbish. You can't get through the doors in your own home if the hoarding is getting in the way. So what often people take as being the whole teaching of the Buddha is actually only the clearing the rubbish out part of the Buddha's teaching. One thing at a time. Let's clear the rubbish out first, and then we can move on to other teachings. At the moment, we're trying to focus those in the root session, which is another session that we have, and which assumes that you know all this. But of course, people are coming and going all the time. So after a while, I tend to get a bit repetitive. The Dharma is not changing into something else. The Dharma is always the Dharma. So the teaching is going to be the teaching, and what I teach is going to be a repetition of the teaching, trying to make it simpler, trying to make it more conducive to our own culture. Okay, so wanting. Now, what we want can vary from one culture to another, one historical period to another. Wanting a car, for example, I don't think was something that the Buddha craved for, or that anybody craved for. There were no cars in his time, but there were carriages for the wealthy, I suppose. It's not even necessarily physical wanting. Now, the breakthrough is when you can be honest with yourself, because we all have an image of ourselves. And if something negative pops up, then we kind of push it away, saying, no, I'm not that person. But why not say, well, maybe I am that person a little bit now and then, right? That's the breakthrough. I am that person some of the time. That applies to every single one of us, me included, with my struggles to be a reasonable teacher. Sometimes I get it wrong. Sometimes sometimes I upset people unnecessarily. Necessarily is okay, but unnecessarily is not okay. Okay, so think about that. When your mind is slipping into craving or a wanting, a desiring something, what comes next? Well, first of all, to acknowledge it. It's there. There it is. That's me. Doesn't feel too good, but it's not the end of the world. But can I let it go? Well, that's where a whole range of other teachings come into play, which are how to let go of the rubbish. First of all, you've got to acknowledge, and this is the big step for hoarders, actual hoarders who are hoarding stuff in their house, is the first is to acknowledge is that I am a hoarder. I have hoarded a lot of stuff, and it gets in the way of my growth of compassion and peace and wisdom. Right. Now, of course, there's a little trap there. I could become very desirous of compassion, peace, and wisdom too. So I've got to go gently here and with some fluidity and some self-understanding without falling into a new trap. Otherwise, the 5 hindrances just become something else that I am desiring to implement. Okay, so go gently and don't beat yourself up, and don't see yourself in a negative light. Just see yourself as in a human light. This list is not about any particular person. It's about we human beings. And you are a human being, so it's not surprising that we find the same thing happening all the time. All the way up to the dictatorship at the top of society is driven by wanting and craving, power over others, etc., etc. Now that little thing, we're not all dictators, but you can be sure that there are things that we desire, some of which are perfectly understandable. We desire food to stay alive. Do we desire an extra tiramisu after lunch? How about just putting it to one side, seeing how you feel about that? You might say, oh, you have a lot of excuses, always lots of excuses. Well, it's only one, and I don't do this very often, and well, okay, excuses. Have we got the willpower to say no sometimes? Have we got the willpower? The Buddha makes quite a lot out of willpower. Actually, it's an important part of the teaching. It's not something requiring a lot of strength. It's just having acknowledged that this is probably, however trivial, it's not what I should do. Then just saying, okay, I'm not going to do it. It sounds simple, isn't it? But in Western civilization, we go in the opposite direction. We gather as much junk as we can. We consume as much as we can. We want something new all the time. So there are constant innovations, which makes the hoarding pile up. Because we don't want a second-hand or third-hand version of something. We want something new all the time. So there's this constant desire for the new, the innovation. It's complete madness. Okay, desire, ill will is the next one. Now, ill will sounds a bit old-fashioned, but it's a negative disposition towards somebody or something. That's not liking someone or avoiding someone. What's the answer to that? Well, we can have a discussion about that soon, but let's just quickly. Somebody that you don't like, maybe. Or maybe a member of the family that you don't like very much either. I think I've got one or two, to be honest. And they probably don't let me either. Think about things like, I think the best piece of advice I've ever heard is to look for the goodness in that person. If I have a person that I really don't like, and then I actually look for what is good in that person, I'll probably find something. To give an example, I discovered that the person that I thought was very selfish and I didn't really like them very much. I was being very judgmental. And then discovered that he did a lot of charity work for St. John's Ambulance. And I thought, oh, wow, I wouldn't have thought he would do that. But he did. And not for anything, not any reason particularly, just wanted to help. So there you are. There was, So you can always do that with people. Say, well, but what is the good part of them? Why am I always judging in terms of the bad part? There's almost certainly something that's good, but you have to think through it with an open mind. There may be some people that you just think, well, he's 100% bad. It doesn't happen all that often, actually, but there are cases. But usually when you look into that person's history, which is something that the Buddha advises us to do, it's called codependent origination. We look back on the conditions that brought that about. That person may have had a terrible life or childhood, may have, who knows. Take that into account. Find a way then of communicating with them. Okay, desire, will, laziness. Well, laziness is not quite the right word, and that again sounds quite judgmental. It's a lack of energy, it's an apathy, it's sloth. And I think we all feel that. I certainly feel that as I'm getting older. But sometimes it's, I don't know how to describe it really. It's like not being bothered, which doesn't sound very pernicious, okay, so I can't be bothered. Well, when it comes to the practice, you have to be bothered now and then, at least now and then, from time to time, enough to make a difference. If you did it very infrequently, then that's not likely to make a difference. So you have to do it enough, that is, being self-aware of one's states of mind, enough for it to become a little bit challenging. It may be discomforting. You may not want to accept that, but then you've got to have the courage to say, don't be lazy, just get on with it, just do it, just change. I'm sure you will think lots and lots of examples. So unblocking the laziness or the apathy can range from taking a deep breath to doing exercises to thinking of the benefits of unblocking, etc., etc. Number 4 is often translated as worry or overthinking. We in the West are very good. We never stop thinking. In fact, we go to bed and then we start thinking again. We wake up in the morning, the first thing, make sure I'm still alive, is I think about something usually useless, and here's one, forget it. And it never stops. It's like an encyclopedia. The mind is like an encyclopedia in which all the letters have got mixed up. So we've got A, B, C, D, E, F. Nice, but it's not like that. The mind goes from A to Z to P to R to Q to A. An exhausting business. Why don't we just take a rest? Because problems are not solved by thinking beyond a certain point. The problems are actually created by the thinking too much. Just think about that. Okay, so worry. Often future-oriented. What will happen next? We don't know what will happen next. Just do our best and carry on, as they say. Finally, there's doubt, which is skepticism. That is, I don't think this will work. I don't see any point in this. There are a lot of people out there who tell them about mindfulness and they start laughing their heads off because, well, maybe they just don't want, or they feel uncomfortable about spending just a little time thinking about themselves or paying attention or awareness of themselves. Maybe they're afraid of what they'll find. But there's no one there to judge you. There's no one there to judge you. It's about your own benefit. It's about being honest with yourself. Not easy, but then nobody's watching. Just do it. Skepticism, uncertainty, dilemmas. All of these we can approach gently, with resolution, with experimentation, by consulting another person that you trust. You think I'm really like this? So if somebody loves you, they will tell you the truth, gently. Okay? And sometimes very difficult. We've all got, not people, but we have all got our defenses, haven't we? Which get in the way sometimes of making any progress. So those are the 5 hindrances: desire, ill will, laziness, worry, and doubt. Desire, ill will, laziness, worry, and doubt. If you've got a copy of the book, then it's in there, pages 198 on 49 to 56. Have a look in the book. It describes all this again with a bit more detail. But also think about other possible hindrances that haven't been mentioned, because this is just, this is the major junk that's been hoarded, that's really getting in the way of the stuff going through the door. But there's lots of other little stuff hanging about. Too many little glass birds flying about on the windowsill. There used to be one, now there's 8. You think, when can this stop? Why do we need another glass bird sitting on the windowsill? Human beings are naturally given to collecting stuff. Maybe it was to get through a rough winter, we needed to hoard stuff to some extent. Okay, so what are other hindrances? Well, other hindrances are pain. Pain is quite a pain. Guilt, loneliness, external pressure coming from somewhere or someone. Life is complicated. But here is someone giving you free of charge, a way out, or a way that at least makes things easier. Doesn't claim to be beneficial to everybody, but it should be of some benefit to most people most of the time if it's taken seriously. So just to quote the Buddha himself on this in the Sutta rather, Nivarana Sutta. This is what is actually written there, what the Buddha says, or is claimed to have said. Monks and nuns, there are these 5 hindrances. Which 5? Sensual desire. Sensual doesn't necessarily mean anything sexual, right? It means the senses, stimulating the senses, the chocolate cake or whatever. Sensual desire as a hindrance, ill will as a hindrance, sloth and drowsiness as a hindrance, restlessness and anxiety as a hindrance, and uncertainty as a hindrance. Will this really work? It's just a fun one. Probably not. It's just a lot of hoo-ha about nothing. So we throw out the baby with the bathwater. What a pity. So he goes on, these are the 5 hindrances, and to abandon these 5 hindrances, when one should develop, guess what? Mindfulness. It's essential to the Buddha's teaching, but it's not the only teaching. Mindfulness. Mindfulness is an analysis and a practice of how to clear out the junk, to make way for a better, more compassionate, wiser understanding of things. Right, so be mindful of these blockages. You've made them yours, and now they're getting in the way. Acknowledge, examine, clean them up, throw them out, let them go. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
New Buddha Way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.